Welcome to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver, CFRO. I'm Tasha Simms.
And I'm Mark Curran.
And we've got an exciting show today. It's a big one, our topic. We're talking about the story of our planet and the reality of who we really are. Our guest is Jude Currivan, Ph.D. She's a I can never say that. Cosmologist, there we go, futurist and planetary leader, a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University and a doctorate in archaeology. She's traveled extensively, working with wisdom keepers from many traditions, exploring the nature of reality. Author of 6 books, including The Cosmic Hologram. Her latest is called The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath, and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. So today we're taking a look at the importance of seeing the entire universe as a unified, sentient entity. And we're bringing science into the mix, which is always exciting for me, hopefully to inspire greater individuation and collective awareness. Welcome to the show, Jude.
Oh, Tasha, it's so lovely to be with you. And Mark, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I have heard you called an evolutionary pioneer who fuses together mystical revelation with grounded scientific knowledge. Does that resonate for you?
Well, it's a very kind description. I would probably describe myself in less beautiful ways, but that's such a lovely way of sharing what I do in service to the collective good, I hope.
And your book, The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath, and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet, seems to be exploring some really deep topics, how everything is interconnected, the universe, the planet, the people, everything, and that we all have inherent meaning and purpose. So I want to just dive right in. And I'm not sure whether I want to start with, if the universe has this inherent evolutionary purpose. I mean, I immediately want to go to, well, 2 things. Where does it come from? And what is it? Those are the 2 biggies, right? That everyone is always kind of wrestling with.
Yeah, and they are enormous. They're existential biggies, and sometimes it seems that science is out there or the universe is out there. And really what the evidence is now showing us is the universe is out there and yet within us, because we are not separated in any sense from that universe and its meaningful existence and its purposeful evolution. And we grew up, I certainly grew up, taught a paradigm, a worldview that basically said that our universe was without meaning, inherent meaning and purpose, that it began whenever it began, billions of years ago, and that somehow it evolved, and somehow in that evolution, consciousness arose. And eventually that journey led to us. And so it was a worldview of materialism and separation. And it's a worldview that, to be honest, has been with us for several centuries now. And even despite the scientific discoveries of quantum physics and relativity physics, it's been a worldview that's really, told us how we are with each other. It's led our education, our healthcare, our governance, our organizations, all our society and economics and basis of how we live with each other is based on this worldview, which we're now finding is fundamentally flawed. And so instead of that materialism and separation as a way of seeing ourselves and our world and acting accordingly, what the leading edge science now and the evidence at all scales of existence now is far more convergent with universal wisdom teachings, with indigenous wisdom teachings, with spiritual traditions. And so what I write about is how this leading edge evidence can actually ground us into a remembering of who we really are. And that remembering is of a universe and therefore us with innate meaning and evolutionary purpose and innately conscious.
And what do you feel is the most compelling evidence that tells you that this is a sentient being or sentient energy that exists to evolve?
Well, first of all, and in the evidence that I lay out in the Story of Gaia, but the prior book to that, the Cosmic Hologram, isn't just my evidence. It's the evidence of tens of thousands of researchers in many fields of research and at all scales of existence. And what we're finding is that the appearance of our universe, its energy and matter and its space and time, aren't fundamental. The last 20 years especially has brought forward these discoveries that show that the appearance of our universe arises from deeper levels of non-physical causation. And so what we're finding is that this is meaningful information, cosmic consciousness, as it were, that expresses itself as the energy, matter, and space-time of our universe. But that appearance is not the deeper reality. And the deeper reality is far closer to what universal wisdom teachings have told us for thousands of years, that not only does our universe exist and evolve as a unified entity with innate meaning and purpose, but that applies to us too. But at its very most fundamental, it's showing us, and we can go into the evidence, what it's showing us is that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. So rather than a great thing, as the Edwardian scientist Sir James Jean said, our universe is more like a great thought of cosmic mind. And so in that regard, we have this convergence, this natural convergence of what leading edge science is telling us, what wisdom teachings are telling us, and what spiritual experiential, the immersion into that sense of oneness, of unity, of wholeness has also been telling us and showing us and inviting us into for thousands of years.
And so for our listeners who are really big on science, can you bring some of that to the table that actually gives concrete evidence that everything you just said, which is so, to me, intuitively true, but for those skeptics sitting there listening going, yeah, come on. Just another new age thing.
And this is not a new age thing. Actually, if it's anything, it's an
old age. But let's talk science.
Let's talk science. We can go down that route as long as you like. I'll start with black holes because as a cosmologist and being involved in black hole research, we wanted to understand what happens to the information embodied in a star, a massive star, when it becomes a black hole, because a massive star big enough so that when it comes to the end of its lifetime, it's used up all its nuclear fuel, so it can't sort of hold itself together anymore. It collapses inwardly, gravitationally collapses, but it's so massive, so gravitationally powerful that collapse can't be stopped. It just continues, and it continues to a point and beyond a point where even light can't escape from that collapsing star. And that's why we call it a black hole, because a point comes when the spherical surface of that collapsing star goes beyond that threshold where even light can't escape. So the whole star, as it were, becomes a black hole. Yeah. But what we then questioned is, well, what happens to all the information that's embodied in that star? Because quantum physics says it can't be lost. Mm-hmm. And yet it seems that it might be. And if it were, then the whole of our foundations of all science would go out the window. What instead we found is that instead of perhaps what might be intuitively understood, is that information remains but is proportional to the three-dimensional volume, the spherical volume of the black hole. That's not the case. The measurements we have within a theoretical framework that hangs together, because that's what science should be, with the evidence and the theory dancing together, is that the information instead is proportional to the surface area, the spherical surface area of the star. And then for a few of us, that raised the question, that's counterintuitive. Why would that be the case? And of course, when we talk about holograms, something similar happens. We shine a beam of light on a three-dimensional object. We bounce it back off, which collects information about that three-dimensional object. We take that information and we put it on a two-dimensional plate or surface, and then we beam another beam of light through it, and that then projects a hologram of that original 3D object as a hologram. That's what we understand. Now, our universe is a cosmic hologram. So what we're now finding cosmologically through the study of black holes is that what we call the boundary of our universe projects cosmic information, meaningful information, that then is projected as the three-dimensional appearance of our universe. So the two-dimensional boundary of what we call space-time, one dimension of space, one dimension of time, then is projected as the four-dimensional appearance, three dimensions of space and one of time, that is the appearance of our universe. And now more and more cosmologists are coming to this view, therefore, that our universe, its appearance, emerges from these deeper levels of non-physical causation. And we found, if you like, the signature, the patterning signature, the mathematical signature of this at all scales, from atoms through to the entire universe, because there's a very clear sort of patterning called fractals that scale up and scale down and are inherently relational with each other. And we find that, for example, when atoms change their characteristics from being a metal to an insulator, the electrons of the atoms cluster in fractal patterns. We find fractal patterns on our planetary home, in coastlines and weather patterns and clouds and ecosystems, and the way that we behave collectively, we behave fractally. We find it in our solar system and the harmonic relationships between planetary orbits. We find it in our galaxy, but crucially, when we analyze the patterns within something called the cosmic microwave background, which is the relic radiation left over from a very early epoch of our universe, and therefore fills the whole of space as it's continued to expand ever since, we find exactly the same patterns in the slight temperature differences throughout the whole of space. So we're finding the fractal signature of the cosmic hologram at all scales, but also we also now, again from the study of black holes and expanding that to the whole universe as something called the holographic principle, we now know that the appearance of our universe comes into being at minute scales, just as in our high definition technologies we have pixelation, yeah, and the better the pixelation, the smaller each pixel of information is, the more high definition the image is. The pixelation of the appearance of our universe is as small, is a trillion times as small as our best high definition holograms. And that pixelation is as small as to an atom as an atom is to the entire universe. So I know this is mind-boggling, but we have so much compelling evidence of this. And it doesn't make our universe any less real. It just means that separation of its unity is an illusion.
And when you write the word information, you put a hyphen after the word in. Can you tell us why you do that?
Well, somebody's accused me of being obsessed with hyphens.
Oh, I see. Just like I have ... That's my favorite.
Yeah. So that's probably a fair point. But I wanted to differentiate between information, which could be gobbledygook. You know, information doesn't have to have meaning. It's just can be. Yeah. It's gobbledygook. What I'm speaking of for our entire universe and everything within it, including us as its microcosmic co-creators, is meaningful. So that sort of, from that very minute pixelation, all of the digitized information that makes up the appearance of our universe then combines, just as we combine the letters of our alphabet, our English alphabet, 26 letters, of themselves have no meaning. We bring them together as words and sentences and poetry and songs, and they have inherent meaning for us. Our universe does that meaningfully to combine that digitized fundamental information as atoms, molecules, stars, planets, people, plants, at every scale up to the entirety of our universe is meaningfully informed, hence the hyphen, by meaningful information, hence the hyphen.
And how does this fit with Earth, which you love to call Gaia, being a sentient being or having that? So it's not a thing, not looked at as a thing, but looked at as a being. How does that fit?
Well, you know, what this is an emergent cosmology of a conscious and therefore innately living, because, you know, I use the word, and a lot of people now are using the word living to describe our universe as a whole, way beyond biological organisms. And, you know, consciousness, sentience, intelligence, mindfulness, you know, are all sort of ways of describing the emergent understanding, the ancient understanding that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They're literally what we and the whole world are. So our universe came into being 13.8 billion years ago, not in, first of all, not in a big bang. It wasn't big, we know that. But, you know, it wasn't in that so chaotic sense of a bang. It was the first moment of an incredibly ordered, exquisitely fine-tuned and ongoing big breath. So as our universe continues to breathe its story, as space expands and time flows forward from that first moment, as a living, conscious, unified entity, a great thought in the mind of the cosmos, then everything in it is inherently sentient, is inherently part of its living story. And that, of course, does include our planetary home, Gaia.
Great thought in the mind of the cosmos. So don't you still yearn to kind of go, well, whose thought, what thought, where did the thought come from? The first thought that generated this. Doesn't that kind of?
Of course it does. And I challenge all of us to sort of be infinite and be eternal, because that is what the cosmos essentially is. We have no way other than perceiving that. And that's, of course, what spiritual teachers, mystics have spoken of. You know, so in a way, universes are emanations within that infinite and eternal cosmic plenum. God, Allah, great spirit, great mystery, cosmic mind, our emanations are literally great thoughts in that eternal infinite mind. And so who is the who? Well, God, Allah, great mystery, you know, cosmic mind, as Einstein called it, whichever name we wish to give to that numinous, eternal, infinite wholeness of all that's ever been, is, and ever could be.
It's almost more important to understand the experience of it and how it can impact not only our lives, but the lives of the planet, rather than getting to that, you know, whose thought was it? You mentioned Einstein, which immediately pops into my brain. I remember him saying, one of his quotes was, the most important question you could ask is the universe a friendly place?
And the answer is yes.
And so for you, how does that answer define how you live? How does that impact how you live?
Fundamentally. And, you know, 5-6 years ago now, when the Cosmic Hologram came out, I co-founded an organism. We don't call it an organization. It's an organism that continues to evolve and emerge, called WholeWorld, again, -view. There has to be a hyphen in there somewhere. and to serve not just the understanding with all of this scientific evidence and this convergence with, you know, universal wisdom teachings, but vitally to experience and then embody unitive awareness of this unity in radical diversity. So for me, and certainly the invitation of our community at WholeWorld-View, and we link up and lift up with partners globally coming from this perspective, it's exactly that. It's how do we educate children of all ages to help them remember this is our innate reality, that unity isn't an ideal, it's real, as my dear friend Julie Kroll says, and unity isn't an aspiration, it's our existential reality, as my another dear friend, Joni Carley, speaks to. So this is key. And this is, we can do this in so many different ways. And there are so many paths into this remembering, but I guess what's mine to do is to bring this awareness forward as best I can, and those who work with me can, so that there's an encouragement, there's an invitation to those folks who say, show me the evidence before I'm on this journey. I'm not starting this journey without this evidence. Here's the evidence, and this is the invitation to this remembering, this literal journey of homecoming to who we really are.
And how does that, you were talking before about what physical reality is. How do our thoughts and understanding, our perceptions, our feelings, everything, how does humanity impact the physical reality?
We are part of the physicalized reality. And, but to understand that physical reality is innately, first of all, it is informed. So all our thoughts, our emotions, your whole, distributed intelligence bodily, we're always radiating and receiving information, whether we're aware of it or not, because we're intrinsic microcosms of our living universe. And of course, the way that cosmic consciousness has created this marvelous wonderland that we call our universe is that the information that underpins and is all pervasive expresses itself both as quantized energy matter and as non-quantized space-time. So in the form of energy matter, we talk a lot about energy, and a lot of us realize that energy is both quantized and it's vibrational. So energy matter is vibrational. We have wavelengths, we have frequencies. The reason that is as it is because that's the ideal, most effective way of information expressing itself in this incredibly interrelated dynamic to and fro that is what the whole universe is about. That's how it experiences itself. That's how we experience ourselves, whether we know or not. So what we need to do is take a more fundamental approach now, and realize it's not just the energy matter, it's what we think, it's the information of which the energy matter is the waveguides. So our emotions, our thoughts, our actions are all part of that, informational interplay and interrelationship of our lives.
And how does choice fit in?
It fits in fundamentally, because what we choose, our worldview, our mindsets, are the stories we tell about ourselves and our place in the world and what our world's about. And we've had a collective story, a collective narrative of materialism and separation. So we've collectively seen the world primarily as something out there, even though our hearts and, our inner knowingness has been at odds with that. Our societies have said, whatever you feel with it, it's pretty irrelevant. This is the reality. This is out here. This is it. And it isn't. It fundamentally is not. But we've bought into it for a long time. And so we've acted accordingly. And now everything is being turned upside down to say, no, we are in ourselves meaningful and purposeful. We are microcosms and co-creators of a meaningful and purposeful world. And that changes everything, because a worldview of separation essentially drives a world of suffering.
Right.
A worldview of wholeness drives a world of joy, of love, because what I'm talking about is a science of love.
And does your book offer tools or ways to open to tapping into this innate wisdom, so that, because it's almost like sometimes it feels people are wired, or the brain is wired to see difference, separation, to see what's wrong. So there needs to be some conscious movement, if you're going to shift that, if you're going to rewire. And I wonder if you have any tools or paths that you have found particularly beneficial in order to do that.
Well, the book itself doesn't, but some of my other books do. But there's two responses perhaps to what is your really important question. A dear friend of mine, Dr. Robert Atkinson, has also just published a book called A Journey into Wholeness. And Bob's book is a companion full of tools and practical guidance and support to really invite and support this journey, literally journey into wholeness. So in a way, what the Story of Gaia does, and before that, the Cosmic Hologram, this shows the reality, the authenticity of wholeness. So that, you know, in a way, the book's got you back. If you're willing to be brave and courageous and go on this journey, the book's got you anchored. It's got you held. It's got your back. It's like, this is real. And then Bob's book and many, many others that are now coming forward and have done, you know, this is the story of the ages, really, are the tools. And my next book, I think, will offer more of that and a deeper sense of us as humanity and what our potential is. But I leave it to dear friends and colleagues and wisdom keepers to offer those tools, because they're also culturally dependent. And what I'm offering is a universal story, universal narrative that actually then is the bedrock for a new and unitive narrative that can be our new and unitive worldview that can underpin and frame all of this journey back into.
I love that. I find that unless one is doing that internally, meaning living unified, a sense of unification with all the various parts we have that don't feel unified, they feel so fragmented and opposite and polarized. But if you cultivate a response of love and compassion and maybe curiosity, because I find it fascinating, the inner psyche and what we're all up to, as opposed to judgment, or when you try to get rid of a part of you, you're literally saying you're separate from it, as if you could get rid of a part. Well, you can't, you're a whole, but understanding it and entering it. So that, I love your work, because it is when a person is doing their inner work and learning how to create that kind of cosmos inside, you're talking about how it's even bigger, not only individual, but collectively. I wonder, do you see us right now in the middle of a revolution? What's going on at this particular time in our evolution that is so, it seems very extreme right now? Lots of polarization, lots of separation, lots of war, nature rebelling as well and acting, speaking. How do you see this?
Well, absolutely. And I talk about our conscious revolution, because this isn't, it seems to me, this isn't a little sort of, few steps. This is probably something greater than we've actually collectively faced. And the possibility of the potential, this is greater than we've ever been invited to throughout our whole human journey. So what I would suggest is that, in telling the story of Gaia, you realize how, and reading it, I hope readers will perceive how her story, the story of our planetary home Gaia, has been evolutionary arcs that have then come to a breakdown to then a breakthrough. And that breakdown has come to an arc that, has almost come to a standstill. And therefore, when that breakdown happens, Gaia responds on many, many different levels to then guide a breakthrough to a higher level of complexity. And so I feel that that's where we are now. I mean, an example would be a metamorphosis. So if you take an example, say a caterpillar is eats as much as he can. She can, he can. A caterpillar eats as much as it can until there's no more to eat. So it's a species that sort of depletes its environment. I'm not judging this at all. I don't have a problem with caterpillars, except when they eat my cabbages, and then I have to say, but a little bit, just a little bit. But they're there to eat, to grow, and then there comes a point where that is cannot go any further. So they go into a cocoon, and in that cocoon, the caterpillar literally breaks down. It dissolves. And as it breaks down, what's called imaginal cells of the potential for the butterfly start to form. So there's this process of breaking down and breaking through. And the old dissolving caterpillar fights, its immune system begins to fight these imaginal cells, and it just makes them stronger. So through this process, what you get is then the emergence of the butterfly, which is then a pollinator species. It sort of moves around and it takes the pollen and passes it around. So it's a very, if we could get inside the worldview of a caterpillar and the butterfly, I suggest that our material separation worldview has been that of a caterpillar. And I actually feel that we are, through this process of metamorphosis, potentially moving to a worldview and therefore an experience, an embodiment of being a butterfly. And, when we look at the underlying, what's called attractors in, again, non-physical space that then appear as ecosystems and our behaviors emerge from a collective level of consciousness as an attractor basin that then plays out through the consequences of our collective perception. And what happens in Gaia's story is that when that's no longer sustainable, which it isn't, then in that underlying potentiality, a new attractor, a more complex attractor, a more highly evolved attractor starts to form. And I think that's what's happening. As the old is breaking down, the new is starting to form. So going back to your point around choice, it seems to me that this is our collective choice at this point.
Do you have hope for the future of humanity, this planet, this
If
life?
I didn't, I'd be in my garden growing cabbages and being very firm with caterpillars. So the fact that I'm doing all I'm doing, yes, I do, because this is authentic hope, because this evidence now gives us authentic hope, because this is the deeper nature of reality and of our universe that's revealing itself to us at this time through so many discoveries and so many ways of, those discoveries are all saying the same thing. None are saying, oh, actually, no, it's still material. They're all saying the same thing at many, many different fields of research and across all scales of existence.
So I have a question, because there's a lot. My mind's going all over the place in terms of what you're sharing, which part of me gets back to, where's the creative point of the universe and where does that, but that's a whole deeper thing in my mind. Now, my question is, and as a cosmologist and an anthropologist, which I read up on you, which I always find fascinating, what is your take on, say, extraterrestrial life, more intelligent life throughout the universe, and its relation to our little blue marble in the middle of it all?
Well, first of all, I would say that our entire universe is an act of cosmic creation. That's the point. It's an act of cosmic creation that is ongoing. Yeah, it wasn't just a point in, the beginning of space-time, the beginning of our universe was a creative act. It was, and ever since has that continued, that creativity from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity. Going back to extraterrestrial life, before our planetary system came into being more than 5 billion years ago, when we look out into the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy, but other galaxies, they have what's called interstellar clouds of dust and gas, and those interstellar clouds are formed from the nutrients, as it were, that large stars, when they come to the end of their lives, and they're not so big as to form a black hole, but they explode as what's called supernova. And in those explosions, all those chemical elements that they've been, fueling their lifestyle and their life cycle for is spread out into the interstellar medium. And what we know is that these interstellar dust clouds, and we have some incredible, beautiful images of them from Hubble and now from James Webb telescope, are full of what's called prebiotic molecules. These are the harbingers of biological life together with ice, vast amounts of ice. So before planetary systems even come into birthing themselves, they're all this promise, potential for more complex biological life in those interstellar dust clouds. So our planetary system was formed from an interstellar dust cloud in our Milky Way. And what happened, it seems the best evidence we have at the moment, is that around 200 light years from what became our planetary system, a star went supernova, and the shock waves from that explosion caused that part of the interstellar dust cloud to collapse. They were perfect. If it had been nearer or more powerful, the cloud would have dispersed. If it was further away or less powerful, it wouldn't have collapsed. But it did collapse, and it became our sun and planetary system. And there was so much stuff, material in it, that a number of planets in our planetary system, like Gaia, were able to be rocky planets. And there was sufficient water that 3 of those planets and some moons of the outer planets were able to have a large amount of what was able to be liquid water. And liquid water is vital to that ongoing emergence and evolution of biological complexity. So we now have that story of us, as it were. What about ETs? We now have evidence, looking out into our galaxy, that there are probably more planets than stars in our Milky Way galaxy. We have about up to 400 billion stars. It could be twice or 3 times that number of planets. Now, not all planets are as Gaia is. We're very, very fortunate. You know, we're in a habitable zone with the right size. So much is right. But when we look out, there looks to be at the moment around 11 million or so Earth-sized planets circulating at the right habitable distance from their central suns within our galaxy alone. Now, given the absolute universal pervasiveness of a story that gets to pre-biology in interstellar dust clouds and is just waiting for planetary systems to enable the nurturing of further complexity, I find it beyond any sort of statistics that there aren't other extraterrestrial and advanced civilizations out there. Some may be much older than us. Some may get to a point in their own journey where they got to our point, where they had a choice. Did they stay in materiality and separation or not? And I wonder just how many of those were at a point that we are, where we could consciously evolve or destroy ourselves. And maybe many have destroyed themselves because they didn't make the choice that is ours to make. So that's my sense of it. And I welcome the realization that we aren't alone, because we cannot be alone.
What do you mean by the term multi-dimensional communication?
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's interesting.
For me, it means I'll talk to anybody.
That's what I'm wondering. I'm going, are you talking to those ETs and you're just keeping it on the down low?
I mean, this emergent cosmology that I write about and I share is of not just a universe that exists and evolves as a unified conscious entity, but multidimensionally. So there are levels, as it were, there are multidimensional discarnate realms of sentience, whether they are, you know, we speak of angelic realms and devic realms. Ancestral wisdom is retained in the sort of the memory of our world, of our universe. And because of that non-local connectivity, which we're plugged into, of course, such communications are our heritage. They are natural to us. And yet, because of a worldview primarily of materialism separation, we shut ourselves down from the openness to having that engagement and communication. And in my experience, we have so much that we can learn from that wisdom, that discarnate levels of wisdom, including Gaia's sentience on many different levels.
Are there some key messages where we're sort of nearing the end of the show? And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you really want the listeners to know, some key pieces that we haven't covered yet.
There's two actually. One is when I was doing my PhD and I was doing what's called field walking, which means you walk a very long way and do a lot of bending and picking up various flints. And I was in a wonderful field near where I lived, a place called Avebury in England, which is a sacred landscape, doing this field walking. And I was on my own very early in the morning, and out of a clear blue sky came these words: in the commonality of our humanity, we're all ordinary. In the commonality of our divinity, we're all extraordinary. And another communication, and this has been a lifelong journey for me, because I'll still talk to anybody and everybody. But I was in a group of friends asking a question of extraterrestrial civilizations and entities, and asking this question, we're at this point now. Did you go through a pinch point of potential destruction? And what was it? Because if we're having this conversation, then you somehow survived that. What did you come to realize that enabled you to make that choice and survive and thrive and move on? And literally the words came back immediately. We came to understand, experience, and embody unitive consciousness. In other words, they woke up to remember they were inseparable. And that's, for me, the choice, the invitation, the learning, the opportunity of our times.
If listeners could take away one thing from your book, from your message, from your life's work, is it that? Or is there also, does your heart have an added piece, a wish for them to, something to land that feels important for you?
My heart invites me to invite everyone who is listening to us to remember you're loved. You cannot not be loved. You are loved beyond measure by a universe that is a living and loving universe. A planetary home, Gaia, that is a living and loving mother to us. And to breathe in that love, to, when things get tough, when it seems that things are falling apart, breathe that love through you, because it is fundamentally who you are and what you are indelibly, innately, inseparably part of.
It's so beautiful. And I just want to also encourage listeners, because this is also on Facebook and they may not know about our page, which is www.consciousliving.radio.org. The show's available as a podcast after, but there's a beautiful YouTube that Jude has done that brings the feelings of what you just shared now, I think, to arise in anyone watching it. Do you have a name for that video? Is there a name for it? We did put it up on the page.
Thank you. We're calling it Big Breath.
Big Breath. Perfect. Perfect. I suggest that everyone take a look and it inspire you to recognize the breath as a way to consciously connect with everything we've been talking about, with Gaia, with each other in such a deeper, more beautiful way. Any final words before we wrap it up for today?
Just a final sort of little line at a WholeWorld-View, which I co-founded 6 years ago now. We talk about, with all of this, act local, feel global, and think cosmic.
Oh, I love that. I think we need that on the page too, Mark. Say it again.
Act local,
yeah,
feel global, and think cosmic.
Cosmic. I love that. That is so great.
I'll go back and pull the quote and add it to the page for sure. And just so you know, the video you speak of, Tasha, is on the page at consciousliving.radio.org, and I've thrown it in the comments on our Facebook channel and the YouTube post as well. So it is there for anybody who wants to catch it, and I do highly recommend it as well. It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
There's another, I have one more question. Do I have time, Mark? What's our time?
Yes, you do. You have 8 minutes and 20 seconds.
Well, don't forget, we have music to play too. But here's my question. You use another term that I didn't quite understand, want to hear more about: supernormal phenomena. Tell me what that is.
Perfect. Well, for a long time, we've talked about supernatural phenomenon or paranormal phenomenon.
Right.
And sometimes it's woo-woo and it's out there, and no self-respecting person would go anywhere near it. But we now realize, and with this emergent cosmology of a living, evolving, unified, conscious universe, that those phenomena, whether it be telepathy, remote viewing, are natural attributes of who we are. And perhaps the most fundamental and simplest is our intuition, because materialism and separation, the old paradigm of science, doesn't have any answer to how our intuition can be such an incredible guide for us. And also that old paradigm doesn't have any place for synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, which they don't violate causality, but they bring that potential, that here and now potential that when we pay attention to, again, can guide us. So instead of paranormal, supernatural, I talk about supernormal. They may not be the state of mind when we're doing the washing up. For me, they often are, to be fair, but I'm not normal in that regard. But they are who we naturally are, and therefore there are natural attributes that can again invite us into a deeper wisdom about ourselves, each other, and the way of the world.
It'd be so exciting if it was normalized and you could just bring it up in conversation and, woo. I'd like to throw the word woo-woo out the window.
I know, because, this science is grounding. This is the best science we now have. And it's all in that, that is the direction of travel. That is what we're discovering. And it literally can change the world.
So tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, any website you want to mention, perhaps your worldview. You're calling it an organism, but it is a community of people. If you can just give them the link to that. I know Mark's going to post it all too, but let's give them the auditory right now.
That's lovely. Thank you. It's www.wholeworld-view.org. So that's WHOLEWORLD-view.org. People are very welcome to visit us. There's lots of resources there, lots of invitations, lots of YouTubes and many other things. And also our partners globally, who are all coming from the same, unitive narrative perspective to be curious about and link up with. And we have a newsletter that again shares stories and all from this perspective. And the Story of Gaia is just out. It's out in the US and Canada now. Will be out in the UK and Europe 8th of December. So that's available from good booksellers and Amazon and Inner Traditions, who are the publisher.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's just been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Tasha, it's great to meet you and Mark. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Really appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Jude Currivan about her book, The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath, The Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. And you're listening to 100.5 Conscious Living Radio in Vancouver, Co-op Radio. I'm Tasha Simms.
And I'm Mark Curran.
And we're so happy you were here. We really are one. We really are, guys. And we're home. This is it. That's all we know for sure, right? We're home. And